It's been a hot minute since I did a top 10 video, and what better way to come back to the genre than with a look back at one of the most famous and highly regarded series on all of YouTube, Epic Rap Battles of History. More specifically, I'm going to be counting down what are, in my opinion, the 10 best episodes of the entire series, the ones I like the most, the ones that keep me coming back over and over again, and that I can watch anytime and still be thoroughly entertained by. Now, of course, narrowing it down to just 10 spots was a tall order that involved cutting many really great rap battles that I personally like a lot. If I wanted to, I could probably make a top 30 ERBs video, and I'd still end up having to leave out some really good ones. That's because ERB never really misses. Even their weaker outings are still entertaining, and I definitely don't think any episodes are outright bad, but for my money, these 10 represent the very best of the best of the best of the best. If everything else in this series is already exceptional as is, then these are the installments that are in a league of their own. Obvious disclaimer, I am not a musician, and certainly not a rapper. I'm judging these less on their objective quality as songs, and more so just by how much personal enjoyment I get out of them. On that note, another obvious claim I must diss is that this video is strictly based on personal opinion. ERB is such a fantastic series that I'm sure if someone else were to do this video, as many very likely have, they may have very few or even none of the battles I have on my list on theirs. And that's a good thing. Like I said, ERB never really misses, or when they do, they don't miss by that much, so the fact that so many videos can all stand toe-to-toe with one another is really quite impressive and a testament to the dedication, passion, and talent that Peter, Lloyd, and the rest of the crew bring to every single episode of this awesomely weird series. But now, it's time for me to celebrate that awesome weirdness by counting down the top 10 best episodes of Epic Rap Battles of History. According to me. But that doesn't really have the same ring to it, obviously, so it's better / more eye-catching to just go for the... No, forget it. Just start the countdown.
Number 10. Stephen King.
This is probably the number on the list that had the most competition, with several battles all competing for the number 10 spot, and it ultimately not really coming down to anything material, more so I just picked the one I liked best at the moment. If I had made this list a day before or after I did, this one would have been the most likely to change, so I guess this battle should consider itself lucky that it made it on here. Just kidding. YouTube videos don't have brains, and so can't consider anything, silly. This one's what I would consider a good example of a standard ERB. It features two decently well-known figures from history with an obvious connection to one another. In this case, both of them are horror writers, duking it out with various battle raps. Each gets two verses to diss the other while propping themselves up at the same time, and it all ends with the announcer inquiring as to who won and who's next. There are a couple things that make this battle stand out from the rest of the crowd though, and those things are what ultimately led to it beating some other similarly ordinary ERBs. One is the fact that this is one of the few battles where Peter and Lloyd aren't present. At all. They don't play either of the two main rappers and don't even make cameo appearances. They are nowhere to be found. Instead, we have Zach Sherwin, an ERB regular who also writes many of the episodes, playing Stephen King. He's pretty good, but the real show stealer here is George Watsky as Edgar Allan Poe. Admittedly, Watsky has a bit more freedom in his portrayal compared to Sherwin, as Poe is a much more distant figure in terms of recent history than King, who himself is a pretty unique guy that's hard to impersonate. But I just feel that Watsky was able to nail the essence of Poe more than Sherwin was with Stephen. It also helps that Watsky's flow is untouchable. As for who I think won, well, both came at each other pretty hard. That did not sound right upon closer reflection. King put more emphasis on wordplay and puns in his raps, while Poe, being played by Watsky, had more of a focus on flow. While Poe definitely came close by virtue of his first verse actually being written in a trochee, I think King won it with his first cousin diss and the final nevermore reference. Definitely a close one though, and if you think Poe won, I can totally see why.
Number 9. Romney!
It's often said that you can't beat the original. And while that's by no means a hard and fast rule, when it comes to presidential ERBs, I think it holds true. Keep in mind when I say presidential ERBs, I'm not referring to any ERB that has a former US president in it. We'll be getting to another one of those later, but more specifically, I'm talking about battles made to tie in with a US presidential election. These must always be a ton of fun to write, not necessarily because politicians are more stupid, incompetent, or easy to laugh at than the average person, but more so because their stupidity, incompetence, and laughability is so well documented and easy to access that the jokes practically write themselves. And that is definitely on display in this battle. Both Obama and Romney throw shade at one another successfully without it ever seeming like one is being given an unfair edge over the other. It's also a very accessible rap battle. I remember watching it when it came out. Back then I knew nothing about politics and didn't particularly care to, and I still laughed at most of the jokes. But now, coming back to it over 10 years later, I understand a lot more of the references and can appreciate the battle in a whole new way. This is a common theme going forward, being able to be entertained by the rap battles when you're younger, but gaining new appreciation for them as you age and become more on the up and up when it comes to things like politics, history, and pop culture, and all that jazz. Epic Lloyd is wonderful as Mitt Romney, as to be expected, but of course, Alpha Cat's near spot-on impression of Obama is what most people coming away from this battle remembering. He's got the tone, cadence, and stammering down perfectly, and the fact that he's able to rap through it is just the icing on top. Also, the Abe Lincoln run-in at the end was the best. Bit slapping the two candidates and considering them equals was just the perfect way to end it. There's not much to say about this one. It's a classic ERB through and through, and being released at just the right time when the election was ramping up, is it really hard to see why this is currently the most viewed video on the channel. As for the winner, Lincoln is the obvious choice. He and How kind of set the standard for the run-in rapper being the one who wins, and I'm not going to argue with that, but as for who the runner-up was, I think the cheesecake and call you Mitt lines from Obama just barely tipped the scale in his favor.
Number 8.
The season premiere rap battles are some of the most important in the channel's history. After all, a lot goes into making these videos, more so now than ever. While that obviously means a lot of hard work for the creators, it also means a lot of waiting on the audience end of things. So being able to come out swinging with the start of a new season and showing your fans that the wait was worth it is extremely important. And in my opinion, the second Darth Vader vs. Adolf battle is the gold standard in this category. Right away, it's hilarious how this little mini trilogy has its own self-contained continuity, with Hitler being frozen in carbonite at the end of part 1, and this one opening with Vader releasing Hitler from his imprisonment just so that he can, in his own words,
Beat your ass a second time!
That is a level of pettiness most of us only dream of achieving. But as for the battle itself, this is one of those where the fun doesn't come necessarily from the cleverness of the bars or even the flows, but more from just how relentlessly the two combatants lay into one another. Oh, and also the beat. This beat is one of the best in ERB history. It's so insanely over-the-top epic, which does fit all things considered given the two guys facing off against each other here. Also, tangential as all hell, but I noticed that this beat and the one for the first Peter vs. Lloyd battle have the same tempo, and one instrumental would, theoretically, go well over the other's lyrics. I would personally love to know if there's a lyric-only version of the Peter vs. Lloyd battle, because I think this beat over that battle would just be 10 different flavors of awesome. Anyway, back to the subject at hand. You know when ERB is good when Darth Vader, who most people seem to agree lost this battle pretty handedly, still brought more fire in his lines than some winners of other rap battles have. That's the sign of sheer brutality right there. Speaking of which, Hitler won this one, just throwing that out there. It was close and both spat fire, but Hitler's just burned a bit more. You know, this is the only Vader vs. Hitler battle on the list, and it's the one where Hitler won. I hope that doesn't say anything about me. Wouldn't want to prove that all the things my brother accused me of were true. Don't ask.
Number 7.
Hey, I just made a video about LEGO animations, and now I'm featuring another one made by one of the best LEGO animators on YouTube, Forced Fire 101. As of this video, he and his team have animated 2 different episodes of ERB, and while both of them are great, and I know many regard the second as one of the best ERBs in history, I've personally always been more partial towards the first one, Zeus vs. Thor. What I mentioned in the last spot about how the utter ruthlessness of the two combatants was part of what made the battle so entertaining, this battle is great in much the same way, except it now comes complete with superior writing, some deeper cuts, and a kick-ass video to go along with it. The way Zeus and Thor just go back and forth, absolutely barreling into one another over and over, is quite entertaining to watch. Nothing is off limits, and similarly to the politician battles, the choice to pit two gods against each other is a great one because that subject matter gives you so much to work with. The wealth of stories and bizarre tidbits about the gods, their history, and where their myths originate is practically begging for some deep cuts, and while the fight doesn't touch on every single one, I think it hits most of the big ones. This one also fires on a lot of the right cylinders for me personally, since I have a vested interest in Greek mythology, not as much as when I was younger, but I still think it's pretty cool. Sadly, I'm not as on the up and up when it comes to Norse mythology, but I know the basics, so most of the references weren't too lost on me. Anyway though, picking a winner for this one is actually pretty easy. Even though I'm more into Greek mythology than Norse mythology, and I do think Zeus had some good lines, I still think Thor won this one. It'd be too easy to yet again say he came harder with his raps, but Thor already had that swallow my babies line, so that'll have to do.
Number 6. The Burger King!
You know what? We've had a brutal last couple of battles on this list. I mean ones where the combatants really went after each other. But now, it's time to take a break from the intense, high-octane ones and go for something a little more fun and lighthearted. Because those battles can be just as great. Which one should it be? This one looks good. Actually, compared to the competition, it really does. Not to say that there aren't any hard-hitting lines in this one, but as far as goofier, more dumb fun rap battles go, this really is the top of the heap for me. I mean, an idea like Ronald McDonald versus the Burger King seems dumb enough that one might have a second thought about making it into an actual episode, but also viable enough that, with enough effort, you could actually make something quite entertaining. And that's exactly what this battle does. I actually don't have as much to say about this one as I do some of the others, however. It just speaks for itself. It is what it is. It's Ronald McDonald versus the Burger King. Plus Wendy at the end. Actually, if I have to find something to complain about with this battle, it might be Wendy. I know she soaks up all the attention for being the run-in, but when you compare her to the other two battlers, I'm not sure if she really brought enough to the table for me to actually say she beat the two of them. As for the other two, and which one I think ultimately won out, while it was close, I'm gonna go with popular opinion here and say that Burger King won. Ronald almost overtook him towards the end, but that first verse from BK was just too much for him to ever come back from. That's about all I got to say for this one. It's fun, it's silly, it's upbeat, but it does all those things so well that I can't resist putting it on the list. Even if it's not technically the very best, it's probably one of the ones I find myself returning to the most. And that's gotta count for something, right?
Number 5.
Group battles are an ERB staple. Every season we get at least one of these, sometimes more, and why not? It's a good setup. Everyone already knows how much fun it is when one other rapper joins the battle, so imagine 2 or 3 other ones hopping in. I know, right? Pure gold. Now, all these battles are great, but as to be expected, some do outshine the others. And the first one I'm featuring on the list is Alexander the Great versus Ivan the Terrible, or more accurately, Ivan the Terrible versus various greats throughout history. We got Alexander, Frederick, Pompey, sort of, and finally capping it off with Ivan's fellow Russian, Catherine. Well, okay, technically Catherine wasn't Russian, she was actually German, but she was the Empress of Russia, and there was already a German in this battle, so shut up. Of course, ERB's costume design and portrayal of the characters is almost always on point, but the ones present in this battle are on another level. Everyone is absolutely perfect, especially Pompey, and everyone gets some good lines too and always gets their proper time in the spotlight. Especially Pompey. Of course, it's very clever and fun that almost all the characters presented are shown dying in the ways that they were believed to have in life, Alexander is poisoned, Frederick dies in his armchair, Pompey is straight murked. I don't think it was at the hands of Catherine the Great though, so that's a bit of an anachronism. I also, of course, love it when ERB group battles give separate beats to the different fighters, just to add even more variety. Both of the ones here are wonderful, but Frederick's flute busting one I prefer just a tiny bit more. And on the subject of Frederick's verse, while I understand that that one is something of a fan favorite when regarding this battle, I actually think Alexander won this. I mean, everyone came with their own heat, especially Pompey, but the sheer intensity of Alexander's, in addition to how balanced it is, having just the right amount of building himself up while throwing shade at his opponent, gives him the win in my book. Who cares if he died first? He still won the rap battle.
Number 4.
While Alexander the Great versus Ivan the Terrible was definitely one of the most creative group battles and had a lot to offer that justified it being on the list, it still loses out to the very first group battle as we know them, Rasputin versus Stalin, or the Russian leaders rap battle, as like with the last one, there's far more present here than just the two listed combatants. This battle really broke new ground for ERB in many ways. Season 2 overall was something of a weird transitional period for the series, with some installments feeling more like Season 1 episodes, and others seeming like they wouldn't be out of place in Season 4 or 5. And this battle, you could argue, is the battle that once and for all firmly cemented ERB's status as a comedic and entertainment juggernaut that could not only make the audience laugh, but also potentially interest them in actually learning some history. This battle is loaded with references to Russian history that those learned on the subject will find great value in and really get a kick out of, but it also has more surface level references that laymen can still understand and laugh at. Both are necessary and contribute to some of the battle's best lines, as it's just a thrill to watch the combatants keep building on one another, getting crazier and crazier as we make our way all the way from the early 20th century to the 21st century. And all in the span of just 2.5 minutes. But it never feels that short because every second counts and they use their runtime very well. Another mark of a quality ERB. And can we take a moment to commend Peter and Lloyd here? In later group battles, usually Lloyd and Peter will play one of the fighters each and they'll have special guests come in to fill the rest of the roles. Here though, it's all them. It's just Peter and Lloyd and they play their roles exceptionally well. Well, mostly Lloyd. His Gorbachev and Stalin are the highlights of this episode for me, but Peter's Rasputin and especially Lenin are also well done. I just think his Putin is a little weak. I mean, the rhymes are good, but Peter's portrayal of him wasn't his best work. Oh god, I have to pick a winner for this one? Come on, can I just leave it as a 5-way tie? I don't know, I guess I'll give it to Lenin, but only by a sliver. That drop-in was pretty sick, even if Gorbachev also had some good zingers. It's really a toss-up between those two, but if I had to choose, I'm giving it to old Vladdy. Has anyone else ever called him that? Probably. Really great battle, definitely the best season finale in my opinion. Everything after this comes more from the middle of their respective seasons, or isn't a part of any season at all. Case in point...
Number 3.
And thus, we've arrived at my favorite fictional characters rap battle of the entire series. Yeah, for a show called Epic Rap Battles of History, they do tend to delve into straight up fantasy quite often. But that's not a bad thing if it's done well, and this represents the ERB team at their best in this category, in my opinion. I have to commend the matchup itself here. I feel like I haven't been saying much about that in previous spots, but for this one, I want to say that I appreciate how they pick two characters that you don't immediately associate with one another, but when you see them paired up, you do kind of say, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Obviously, since it's this high on the list, you know the lyrics are going to be absolutely immaculate. This one has a lot of fun references in that they managed to work it into the rhymes and disses rather than keeping them separate, which is just an added layer of complexity and admirability to the writing. I also haven't given much lip service to the structure of the rap battles thus far, but I think this one employs one of the better ones. Each rapper gets one long verse at the start, then they exchange a couple of quick back and forth towards the middle, and finally cap it off with them both getting a longer one at the end. I think that's the best way to go about doing it, as to make sure each fighter gets enough airtime. Also, not for nothing, even if it doesn't have much to do with the song itself, the video for this one is great purely because Peter and Lloyd took advantage of the fact that while they're voicing the listed fighters, they don't have to play them because we don't see their faces. Instead, we have Robert Hoffman and Ivan Flipsiveles donning the Deadpool mask and the Fett helmet respectively. Their physicality and control over and ability to manipulate their bodies in ways most of us don't have the time or patience to learn how to is one of the big things that contributes to this battle's rewatchability. It's just cool seeing them move like this, especially Boba. I mean, look at him. He's getting down. He's getting jiggy with it. Instant classic. I actually think my previous comment about it being cool pretty much does this battle justice. It really is just cool. It's two badasses fighting each other in a badass way. The beat is cool, the dancing's cool, the burns are cool. Wait a minute. I actually think that's the most apt description for this one. It's not my very favorite. I definitely wouldn't call it the best, but if I had to pick which ERB I thought was the coolest, I think the title might belong to this one. As for the winner, look, Deadpool's awesome. We all like Deadpool, and I think more people went into this one wanting him to win than Boba. There were just more people in the Deadpool corner, but we all have to be honest with ourselves and admit to what is plainly obvious. Boba whooped his ass. He did need a little more than 5 lines to do it though.
Number 2. Batsuit, Sunsuit, and Confucius versus Nietzsche, Socrates, and Voltaire!
Talk about a battle that gets better and better the more you watch it. When I first saw this one, I didn't think much of it. I barely knew who any of these guys were and didn't really understand most of the jokes, so it never had much of an opportunity to get its hooks in me. But the more I watch it and the more of the references I begin to get over time, this one really has shot up in my rankings to the point where I now consider it my favorite non-traditional epic rap battle. When I say non-traditional, that just refers to any battle that differs from the usual 2 rappers going back and forth ritual. Here, instead of 1 rapper on each side, we have 3. And unlike in other group battles, these sides are actually teaming up against the other rappers. Or at least they are at first. I love how rich this battle is, with so many references to history and the lives and beliefs and teachings of all these people that it truly encourages you to do your own digging and actually learn about these people. It makes it fun. It makes learning about history and philosophy and whatnot actually really appealing. It's on par with the Russian leaders battle in that aspect. By this point in the series, ERB's costumes and makeup was at the top of its game, and the performers they got to portray these men only amplified that excellence. These guys just melt into the roles on this one, in a way that's only really outdone by my number 1 pick. Many of the best ERBs usually put in some sort of fun twist on the formula and throw you for a loop towards the end. In this one, the gimmick of the various philosophers turning on each other through being too stubborn to work together is hilarious and even kind of poignant. I mean, name another battle that ends with what is winning instead of who won. But while I like that aspect and wouldn't want the battle to be without it, it does make it kind of hard to call a winner because, I mean, in a way, they all lost. They all turned on each other. But if I had to pick an individual winner, it'd still be tough. I'll give out 2. For the Westerners, I'm gonna have to go with Voltaire. For the Easterners, I'll give it to Confucius. Both of them seemed to do the most for their teams while they were working together, and after they disbanded, they held up the best on their own, so I guess they took it when talking about the individual sides. As for who won between the 2 of them, I'm gonna go with Confucius, though he did get the last word in, so that's not really fair. I was trying to figure out whether or not I should even include any honorable mentions in this video, since, I mean, it's ERB. Chances are if it's not on the list, you can just assume it's an honorable mention. But I decided to be fair, and as a way to please as many of you as possible, we'll be including 1 honorable mention from every season. I know some of you might be upset that I didn't include any season 1 battles on the main list, but I think it's important to acknowledge how hit and miss that season actually was. Yes, there are a lot of classics associated with it, but there are also some pretty forgettable ones, and even ones that seem pretty dated by today's standards. Still, while this initial Darth versus Adolf battle does look a lot better when compared to the surrounding battles than if it was, say, smack dab in the middle of season 3, This does stand out as one of the most important battles in the series, as it was one of the first that showed us that this crazy new series might be something worth paying attention to. The Season 2 honorable mention is Gandhi versus Martin Luther King Jr. I thought long and hard about putting this one on the list, and to be honest, I'm still considering switching things around as I'm reading this, but I'm gonna stick to my guns and leave this as an honorable mention. Consider it my number 11. For Season 3, another Key and Peele battle, Michael Jordan versus Muhammad Ali. How could you go wrong with Key and Peele? I will admit it is a bit odd that Key had to don blacker face to more accurately portray Jordan, but aside from that blotch of weirdness, I have no real complaints about this battle. Very fun and rewatchable. Season 4 is going to Terminator vs. RoboCop. While it being a rather no-brainer fight in regards to the participants did factor into me leaving it off the list, I still can't deny that the rhymes are fly and the beat is sick.
And he died for your sins.
Season 5's HM, that's honorable mention, you probably could have guessed that, is Ash Ketchum versus Charles Darwin. I don't see too many people talking about this one. It seems to be one of the more forgotten ERBs, and that's unfortunate because it's actually pretty entertaining and doesn't deserve to be overlooked the way it has. It's not a true classic for the series, but it's still a lot of fun. Give it another watch, it might be better than you remember. For Season 6, I'm gonna have to go with, honestly, Mother Teresa versus Sigmund Freud. The battle just writes itself. You could not have picked two more polar opposite people if you tried, so of course watching them duke it out in rap form is so much fun. Season 6 had a lot of good ones, some of the best in the entire series by my metric, and this is definitely up there. It almost made the list, but not quite. And finally, for Season 7, which doesn't give me much to choose from since it only has 4 episodes currently, I'm giving it to the 3 Johns battle. It's an interesting spin to put on the classic formula, having 3 rappers from the very beginning rather than having one jump in partway through, and I love how each one of them is portrayed. I really have no solid reasoning for leaving this one off, other than I just like the other battles more. Now, finally, let's tackle my number 1 pick.
Number 1. Boston, Georgia! Boston!
Hear me out. I know we've had battles on this list that changed up the formula, ones that broke new ground and took the series to new heights, ones that, on their own, stand the test of time as true internet classics, and by comparison, this one might seem a little plain. It's just the standard setup, no run-ins, no gimmicks, just a ordinary ERB, which we all know are still good, but what justifies this one being at the top? Well, you just kinda answered your own question. Yes, it is standard, and it is typical, and that's part of what makes it so great. That rather than relying on a crutch or something external to make it stand out, this one simply takes the standard ERB formula and does it as, for lack of a better term, perfectly as possible. The performances? Bitch please. Remember how I said in the Philosophers battle it felt like the performers became those characters? Here, there isn't even a becoming, they just are these people. The costumes and makeup, again, perfect, taking great strides in getting the looks of these two just right. The editing, a lot of creative visuals, interesting backdrops, and ways of matching the two rappers stylistically. The beat, unique, fitting, and catchy as all hell. Last but certainly not least, the writing. This is often regarded as one of the most even rap battles in the history of the series. Both of the combatants get very valid and hard-hitting blows in on one another, while having a great back and forth in which they refute the other's attacks against them. It's so balanced, it's so well-paced, it just feels right. And it's all wrapped up in one of the best endings to any ERB ever. Seriously, you could say all you want about the battle itself, you cannot deny the greatness of this finale. Once again, the style is great, with the footage going to black and white and half speed, creating a really interesting effect. Props to the editors on that. But more importantly, the way it doesn't even have a conclusive final line, and instead just finishes with Churchill's proud declaration of,
"Whatever shit you throw at me, I'll just return to sender! I'll battle to the end and I will never surrender!"
giving us the impression that the fight's not even over. They're just gonna keep going at it until one of them falls, or possibly forever. It's just, chef's kiss. It's the perfect cap-off to a near-perfect battle, and my personal favorite epic rap battle of history. I still need to pick a winner? Who cares? We won. The fans won, okay? Alright. If I really have to choose, I'm gonna say TR, but only by a little. His lines hit just a bit harder, but Churchill's were still wonderful, and he was still very entertaining, thanks in no small part to Dan Bull's great performance. But seriously, Epic Lloyd as Theodore Roosevelt, come on, that was like the role he was born to play. And I think that brings us nicely into the end of this episode. I hope this tribute served you well as an overview of one of the internet's most successful endeavors. ERB is an awesomely bizarre idea, brought to life by excellent writing, stellar performances, and, as the series went on, some surprisingly solid production values. And nice Peter, Epic Lloyd, if either of you are watching this, which you might be considering how generally receptive you are to people commenting on or reacting to your work, can I just say one thing? I would personally like to submit my request for a Mussolini versus Gaddafi ERB. I'll have it known that both me and my brother came up with that idea, so I don't want to take all the credit, and I know that you can't make these as fast as you used to, so even if this idea does get chosen, it's going to be put in a line, and a long line at that, but god damn it, I am willing to wait if it actually comes to fruition. Anyway, yeah, ERB, it's a good series, and if you somehow haven't seen or heard of it after all this time, may I ask what the going rate on boulders is? You seem to have a lot of experience with living under rocks. Hey there, looks like you made it to the end of the video. I guess that means you must have really liked it, huh? Well, if you did, I'd appreciate you showing me some support by maybe liking the video, or disliking it, your choice, sharing it around to friends or anyone you know who might get a kick out of it, checking out more videos, which will show up in a bit, and of course, subscribing to the channel and hitting that bell icon to be notified about more content like this. Thank you for watching, have a great day, and until next time, see ya.